Hey folks, John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here with our next installment of the Transportation Fraud Prevention Series. This is part 6, Double Brokering Responses. And what the purpose of this particular part is to help carriers and brokers better deal with a double brokering situation as it is unfolding. There are certain do's and don'ts through this process that have to be addressed. And if we approach this from an emotional standpoint, then the information that we're trying to get across can come across, well, incorrectly. So it's important that carriers and brokers communicate with each other properly through these events in order to mitigate any damage or misunderstandings that can take place. This is brought to you by AccuBid Pro. Be sure to bid better with AccuBid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of AccuBid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with AccuBid Pro.
So let's go ahead and get into the meat of what we have today. We want to make sure that everyone understands where both sides are coming from, and understanding where both carriers and brokers are coming from in these types of situations allows us to better communicate our intentions and the issues that are involved. And a lot of it is going to depend on when we are in possession of the cargo, when we're not in possession of the cargo. Has the paperwork been submitted, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and tear into if we are currently in possession of the cargo. Guys, for you carriers out there, whatever you do, don't let the scammer know that you know something is wrong. Okay. You don't want to ask them about it. You want to be able to find additional help. You can always contact somebody like me and figure out what the heck's going on. Because let's face it, if you're in possession of a double brokered load and you know that your rate confirmation is bad, you suspect the BOL may also be bad, pull over and investigate. You need to figure out who the real broker is, if at all possible. And if you can't figure that out, get help. But whatever you do, the scammer cannot know that you have an idea of what's going on, because once they realize that, they're already engaged in fraud. They will further their fraud by forging a signature on the BOL, turn it in as POD, and steal the freight bill. So you don't want them to know what's going on just yet, not until you have a new rate confirmation in hand from the real broker. So once you have the real broker identified, you're going to need to provide them certain things. Give them a copy of the BOL, one that verifies that you're actually the one in possession of the cargo. Two, you want to make sure that you give them the scammer's rate confirmation. You want them to know what information you had, which led you to where you are at that moment. Because if you're going the wrong direction, they're going to wonder why you're in Texas when you should be in North Carolina. Well, that rate confirmation will tell them, okay, that's because somebody lied to them and told them that's where it needed to go. And certainly, you also want to have pictures of the load, if at all possible. If the cargo is sealed, make sure you take pictures of the seal. That, again, will help verify that you are in possession of the load. And then once the broker is satisfied, you actually have his cargo. Damn it, you want to know what the true destination is. Hopefully, it's the same place you're headed to. But if it's not, once you know that new destination, you now have an obligation to go ahead and get it to where it's supposed to go, or take it back to the shipper. But work that out with the real broker. And trust me, if the real broker is notified that you have the load and not the scammer, they'll work with you to sort it out, because the owner of the cargo is going to be exceptionally grateful that you prevented the cargo from getting stolen. They tend to help you a lot more in those situations. Be forthcoming. When you lay all your cards on the table and you're not having anything from the broker can make a lot more magic happen for you. Now, if you've already delivered the cargo by the time you realized that it was bad, it's probably only because the carrier didn't get paid. Your factoring company may have said, "Oh, sorry, this is not a good load. We're not paying you," or whatever. And then you sit there and you call the guy that you think's the broker, and they ghost you, because they don't need you anymore. You sent them a POD when you first dropped. They've already submitted it to the real broker, and they already got paid. They're already in the wind. You're kind of hosed. But the law does say that the carrier must always be paid. So the only recourse that a carrier is going to have is going to be towards the beneficial cargo owner. That is the consignor or consignee, and that is per 49 CFR 377. Or the broker shipper contract probably forces the broker to assume responsibility for that recourse, in which case you're going to be recoursing against the real broker. It is absolutely critical that if you think something is wrong, that it be discovered before you deliver. It minimizes the challenges that exist when it comes to dealing with pay. Now, carriers, if you do have trouble collecting because of a situation like this, there are groups out there who help. You can hire a professional collections company to represent your interests and seek collection. As the double broker bounty hunter, I do carry a license and a bond to do that. Please make sure if you use a collections agency that they are licensed and bonded, and that is for your protection. Don't just give your debt to any Joe Blow who says, "Oh yeah, I can get your money for you," because they can sit there and walk away with the money. You want a professional. You also want to make sure that your timing is not bad. A lot of people are really surprised when they find out how much time they have to file a claim when they're not paid on a load. For interstate loads, you have 18 months to initiate a claim for a payment. So that's a long time. So dig back through your files. If you got screwed 15 months ago, give me a call. I can help get you paid. Now, if it's an intra-state load, which means it stayed within the same state, it's going to be governed by the state law. And state laws vary between 24 to 36 months as to when you can file claims for non-payment. Some problems really come in when we're dealing with theft. Okay. And it's going to come down to if you've been dealing with an impersonated broker or an impersonated shipper as to how screwed you really are. So let's take, for example, if you're dealing with an impersonated broker. Okay. That basically means you don't know who the real broker is. You need to figure that out. Okay. And if you can confirm who the real broker is, you need to give them every piece of information you have about the load. If you've already delivered, where did you drop it? If it happened to be at the wrong destination, which meant the cargo has been stolen, then make sure they know, one, it was at the scam broker's direction. Two, provide all the information you can possibly imagine to the real broker so they have a chance of trying to locate the cargo. And three, call the police for the jurisdiction of delivery. They can immediately dispatch somebody out to see if the cargo is still there. If it is, the police can then seize the cargo, and then we can either reload it back onto your truck, or we can at least put it on administrative hold through law enforcement until the real broker can find somebody to pick the cargo back up and get it to where it's supposed to go. Frankly, there's no legal recourse available, because if the impersonated broker is the one who arranged everything, the contract's not valid. So whatever work you did, don't expect to get paid for. Sorry, that's just the nature of the beast. Because let's face it, the cargo didn't get to where it was supposed to go. Therefore, you're not going to get paid. If there was an impersonated shipper who hired a real broker, who then hired you as the real carrier, things are a little different. The real broker is the one who who's going to get shafted here, because you have a contract with the real broker. You have a confirmation from the real broker. You did exactly what you were contracted to do. Therefore, the real broker is still obligated to pay you. Okay, even if the real broker didn't get paid from their customer because their customer was a scammer. So throwing that out there. And in those cases, please cooperate with FBI investigations in dealing with those. It does no one any good to run away from the investigation. Yeah, in case you can't tell, we're recording this just before Christmas, and a delivery guy just showed up, and I've got chihuahuas. So that's what you're hearing. I love my Violet to death, but she can be distracting. At any rate, if you're dealing with an impersonated shipper, carriers, you still get paid. Brokers are the ones that get hosed in those types of situations. Bottom line is, carriers, if it doesn't look right, look into it, investigate it, dig deeper, know what to look for. Get help if you need it. But if you have any suspicions, you need to verify it before it delivers, and get help if you can't figure it out yourself. Carriers, this is what a bad response looks like from you. Holding the cargo hostage. Now, many of you have heard in one way or another, anecdotally or whatever, of something called lien of carrier. That basically says that a carrier has leverage by holding a cargo. Well, what most of you don't understand is that you can only do that when there's no reasonable expectation of being paid. So if you're dealing with a double brokered load, initially, do you have no expectation of getting paid? Yes, which means you can pull over and then try to sort out your situation. Okay. Does that mean you can then seize the cargo, sell it off, and all that shit? No, it does not. Okay. If you do this wrong, if you stop and you hold the cargo, you could be guilty of cargo theft yourself. You can get a freight guard. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. So you have to do this right. Once you make contact with the real broker, you know where it's supposed to go. You need to start rolling again. The other mistake that carriers make in these situations is demanding more money than the broker paid the scammer. One, the broker is not obligated to pay you more than what they offered originally for the load. End of story. Don't even try it. And when I have carriers who contact me about situations like this, I give them this particular example. You're paid for one pallet to go 1 mile, and the scammer offered you $1 million to do it. Of course, you're going to take it. You find out it's a scam. You get a hold of the real broker. Real broker says, "I'll pay you $300. That's what I paid. That's what I paid the original guy." You can't go back there and say, "Mr. Broker, I was promised $1 million. You're going to pay me $1 million, not $300. Sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? Well, if you were promised 1,000 and the real broker's only going to pay $300, it's the exact same principle. The real broker pays whatever they agreed to pay originally. So if you insist on getting the number that the broker, that the scammer promised you from the real broker, you can receive a criminal complaint for extortion and a freight guard and all this other stuff. Be reasonable. Remember, you are both victims. That being said, let's talk about how brokers respond to these situations. Okay. If you're dealing with a double brokered load, and Mr. Broker, you found out that whoever you gave the load to is scamming it, cancel the load. Just freaking cancel it if you can. Now, of course, you are worried about your customer and you've got obligations, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I say if you can. But make sure you're talking to the right people all along the way. Communication is absolutely key. It's only really effective to cancel a load if there's no carrier on site. If a carrier shows up and you still want to cancel the load, you might want to go ahead and give the carrier a TONU. It makes you look good. It helps the carrier who got scammed because they didn't have to go too far, and everyone's going to be happy. Trust me, it's a good practice to have. Now, if you wait until the carrier arrives to pick up, that can also be a good thing because at least now you can identify who the real carrier is and you can transfer the load on a paperwork perspective to the real carrier. That is actually a preferred way to do it because you're still going to get your cargo moved. It's going to go to the right place and your customer will be happy because there's no delay. So that's usually the better way to deal with it. I mean, because let's face it, if the carrier shows up, they've already been identified, which is how you probably figured out that it was scammed in the first place. So you know the carrier is real. You might want to consider, at least your compliance department probably needs to consider waiving compliance requirements if they are not already set up and let them haul the load because they're there. They're taking care of your customer. They're obviously real. It's all good. Just work with them. And then give the carrier the ability to negotiate a rate. So you get to go back and renegotiate the rate. You can either set it back for whatever you had promised the scammer. If you had a lot more money in it, it could be that the guy's trying to negotiate a better market rate. You can entertain that. That's completely up to you. But give them the opportunity to negotiate. And if they decide they don't want the load because you're not paying enough, because remember, that carrier was probably promised a hell of a lot more. If they decide at that point they don't want the load, then they say no, you can cancel the load, and you don't have to worry about a TO on you because you gave them the opportunity. Kind of helpful there. Now, let's assume that the cargo is actually in motion now. Well, the cargo is moving. Now everyone discovers that the cargo is being double brokered. So first things first, you got to confirm the damn cargo. You need to make sure that it is in fact your cargo. You have carrier XYZ that you don't know, so they're saying, hey man, I got your cargo. Well, how do I know you actually have my cargo? Get the load docs. You want that BOL, you want the photos, you want the scammer's rate confirmation. Make sure you get everything that you can so that you can verify it. And once you verify it, okay, great. Now let's make sure we got this sorted out. I tell a lot of brokers that I consult for that if you are ever in doubt as to who it is that actually has your cargo or who is actually delivering the cargo, make sure they send you the actual physical BOL after delivery, the actual pen and ink document, not a photocopy, not a scan, the actual document. And oh, by the way, carriers, if you do send the actual BOL to a broker because there's a potential dispute, make sure you insure the document for the amount of your rate confirmation. So if the document disappears for whatever reason, you can file a claim against the courier because that document's the only proof that you actually hauled the load. Once you have all the proof necessary, Mr. Broker, that carrier is actually the carrier with your cargo, put them on the load. Just go ahead and put them on there. If they don't have enough authority to meet your compliance requirements, waive it because they're already in possession of the cargo. There's no reason not to waive it. Then immediately issue a new rate confirmation Because once you have that rate confirmation out to them, whether they agree with the rate or not, they now have a reasonable expectation to be paid, and the cargo must be moving towards its destination. You will keep your promise to your customer. Okay, so get that rate confirmation out. Okay, and by all means, make it the same as what you promised the scammer. That is an industry standard. There is no law for that, but that is the standard accepted throughout the industry. You can reward a carrier with more, depending on the circumstances, okay, but you can't reduce them from a matter of ethics. Just keep all that in mind, okay? Because that could be a very touchy situation. Now, if the cargo is already delivered and you've already paid the scammer, and then another carrier comes up saying that they're the ones who actually hauled the load, Mr. Broker, you've got a problem. At the very least, you have a situation, as we described earlier, called vicarious liability. If you ended up booking the load with somebody and you booked it with the wrong person, then your customer may have to pay a second carrier. And again, you probably have in your contract that you assume that liability on behalf of your customer. So then you will have then double pay liability and may pay for the same cargo twice. I can tell you from experience, if you are ever in that situation, always ask for that pen and ink BOL. Do not pay anyone without it. That way you know you are paying the right individual. If the carrier is being impersonated, which is what happens 99% of the time these days, a scammer gets a carrier's documents through either a phishing scam or another double broker scam or whatever, but they have the carrier's documents. They may try to book a load as that carrier. If you don't vet it properly, you could have a series of problems. Okay. But the very first thing you need to do when you're dealing with a double brokered load is to make sure that the actual owner of that authority and their representatives are not involved in the scam. If you can verify that, then you shouldn't be throwing freight guards and negative reviews against that carrier, because clearly they are a victim. And I'm sorry, you need to be complete in that investigation. Just because the carrier hails from Southern California does not instantly mean they are in on the scam. Okay, so you have to be objective. Ideally, you want a third party to investigate it for you. Because if you file a freight guard against the carrier incorrectly, and they can prove in a court of law that you did it incorrectly and you cost them their business, you then, Mr. Broker, could be financially liable to that carrier for the loss of their business. Make sure you contact the shipper. Try to get as much information on the real carrier from the shipper as you possibly can. It is quite likely in a lot of these impersonation cases that the cargo is being stolen. Alert the FBI. If it hasn't delivered yet, alert the FBI anyway. So if it does end up showing up at the receiver, you can then alert the FBI, hey, it actually delivered, everything's cool, fine, no problem. The FBI would rather have a false alert that then comes back as, oh, we found it, it's been delivered, life's good. Then your cargo got stolen, you waited 2 or 3 days, you couldn't find it, and then you called the FBI. Oh, they don't want to hear that, okay? I will tell you that if you call the FBI over stolen cargo, are they going to find your cargo? Most likely not. But what they are going to do is they're going to take all of your information, they're going to throw it into a database, and that database is going to consolidate that information and try to identify patterns. And the sooner we can identify specific patterns that point to individuals or a ring of scammers that the federal government can actually go after, once they can do that, well, now you've taken a group of scammers off the street. So it's important that they at least get the information so that they can discern patterns. So please do not hide anything. Make sure the government gets the information, whether it's the FBI, DOT, etc., so that we can try to isolate individual patterns and get these guys and bust them, hopefully for good. If the shipper has been impersonated, you got another whole set of problems. You need to be verifying your shippers. Okay. You can't just have somebody call you and say they're from Walmart and they're willing to give you loads. That doesn't happen. Okay. You need to verify that they've got the authority to award cargo to you, especially if they're calling from a big box shipper. Me personally, I like to meet my clients face to face if at all possible, on video, on the computer, or hell, face to face lunch is always the best. You want to know who your business partner is. You want to develop that connection. That will mitigate any issues you may have in the future. You also want credit references. Okay, you don't want Joe Blow showing up saying, "Yeah, I got a whole bunch of stuff to move," but he's been broke and he's never paid anybody. He's just trying to find somebody else to move freight for him so he can get paid, and he's just not going to pay. He's going to skip town and not pay it. You don't like those kinds of situations. Again, do your due diligence. Okay, because when you issue a rate confirmation to a real carrier off of a load from a scam shipper, it's still legally binding between you and the carrier. You still have to pay that carrier, even if the cargo was a scam. So, bad responses that brokers can make in these cases. Offering the real carrier only what the scammer promised if it was lower than what the scammer was paid. Guys, you can't do that. Okay. One, it's a form of fraud. It defrauds your customer, because if you figure out that you have a double brokered load, you offered $1,000 to the scammer. Scammer offered to pay the real carrier $600. You can't turn around and just pay the real carrier $600 because that's what they agreed to, if you're not going to pay your customer back the excess $400. Just pocketing that right there is a huge problem. It will also draw a lot of attention to you and can force the carrier to look into invoking the broker transparency law. And as much of a hot topic as that is today, if the Fed hears a complaint about broker transparency and it was in relation to a scam load, I can tell you, by knowing FMCSA procedure, they will look into that far more closely. So please, it's just easier just to pay the same amount, whether it's more or less than what the scammer promised the carrier. Just pay the same amount each time. It is in your best interest to do so. It is also bad business to refuse to acknowledge a real carrier's claim because you have a contract with the scamming carrier. Having a contract with a scamming carrier doesn't mean crap, because settled law indicates that when one party enters into a contract with fraudulent intent, the contract is not enforceable. Boom, end of story. So if a carrier double brokers a load on you, you don't have to pay that carrier. Sorry, I don't know how more plain to put that. Okay, because if you are in that situation, the carrier has the load on their back, the real carrier has the load on the back. They've proven that it's your load. They have reached out to you. Okay, they're entitled to be paid because they are the real carrier. Now, they can either recourse against your customer under 49-377, which you don't want that to happen. Okay, or if you continue to insist, no, you're not paying them for the load because you have to pay this other guy, now that carrier has zero expectation of getting paid. Now they bring on an attorney and can file under UCC Section 7, 307. That is the lien of carrier. They can seize and sell the cargo at that point. So please work together. The law supports the real parties working together. So work together. It's easier for everybody. It's also bad business to sit there and file freight guards against the real carrier in most situations when you're dealing with a double brokered load. It could be that the real carrier had to contact your shipper to find out who you are. That's not back solicitation. It's also, if they have no way of identifying you, but they only know the shipper, so they tried to bill the shipper, that's not back solicitation either. Okay. All your customer has to do is say, no, this broker is the one who's responsible for that load, recourse against the broker. Okay, great. Then the carrier goes to the broker until the broker refuses, in which case, yeah, we go back to your customer. But you get the general idea. It's not back solicitation to bill your customer if they don't know who you are in the middle. So don't throw a freight guard for something like that. Holding cargo hostage is only valid if you gave the real carrier rate confirmation and they try to stonewall you for more money, or if they sit there to try to get something over on the real broker. That's when you can throw a freight guard for holding cargo hostage, not because they stopped while they're trying to investigate who the real broker is. That is actually a responsible maneuver, and they shouldn't be punished for that. If fraudulent activity does occur, the carrier has every right to invoke the broker transparency law in order to make sure that everything is sorted out. Okay, you can't just throw a freight guard against the carrier for invoking their statutory rights. Put them on a DNU. Okay, fine. You have that right. But throwing a freight guard on them and destroying their business, there's bigger things behind it. Let's talk to each other and sort situations out before we resort to destroying businesses. The bottom line here is that both the carrier and the broker are victims on these types of fraud. Okay, both of you are going to lose money in one form or fashion. So you need to work together and understand each other's individual positions to mitigate losses with each other, because that will ensure a continuing relationship between the two. The scammers live in that space where there's conflict between the carrier and the broker. They want that friction. They want that distrust because they can hide their activities in that. And while everyone's trying to sort out what really happened, that scammer's running away with the money. Let's trust each other, understand what's going on, gather the right information. And that is the fastest way to resolve the situation instead of sowing distrust. We all should be working together. If you ever need help dealing with a double brokered load or any other kind of fraud, you can always contact me, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, at jcanter@vigilanttransport.com. My phone number and website are on the screen. Please get help. If it ever gets to the point that the load was delivered before you get help, there's a lot more damage that goes on. So the sooner you speak up, the better. Stay safe out there, folks, and whatever you do, don't let scammers take you for a ride.